I'd like to introduce Adoram Therapeutics. So it's a startup spin-off from the University of Geneva. We're tackling cancer, but also other indications. So we'd like to expand and look at many different therapeutic areas that are of interest. So to the patients that are in need, also huge markets involved. Oh, this doesn't work, so I use the button. Okay, so first of all, why are we developing new pharmaceutics? So it's pretty clear to everyone in the audience. There's current drugs, they work for some people, but there's still a really large residual set of patients. For example, every year, about 3 million patients go into their doctor's office, they've been treated for cancer, nothing's working. So these people, they're left with really dire kind of consequences. There's nothing left. They need drugs that are working even longer, keeping people alive and allowing them just to be healthier. And that's just for cancer. Then for all the other indications, different diseases, there's millions of people in the same situation. They've been to the doctor years later, they're probably dying, and new drugs are needed. So we need to make better drugs that are both safer and more effective. And this is why we made Adoram Therapeutics. We're developing a special type of small molecule. So you've all probably had a small molecule drug. It's something you can easily take by the oral route, and that's one of the advantages. But there's other advantages that we can build in using a new technology that was developed at the University of Geneva over many years. And it's called allosteric modulation. For the people that aren't scientists in the room, don't worry, I'll show you a schematic of what that actually means. We know small molecule drugs, they're great. You give them by the oral route. They're very cost effective compared to some of these other biologics or cellular therapies. But they have a few problems. So if you've taken some small molecules, maybe you have had adverse effects. There's lots of side effects. They go throughout the body. So we're thinking of making next generation small molecules. That means you can make your drug more specific to target only the diseased tissue, have less toxicity, but also there's advantages at the molecular level where you can make the drugs even more powerful and resolve the disease more effectively compared to regular drugs. And listed here, why the allosteric mechanism at the chemistry or molecular level, you can see here, they don't have to compete with this binding site that all the other drugs go for. We target new sites that we found on the cell, and that's thanks to this platform technology. So by targeting those sites, you can have more powerful or fine-tuned modulation, better selectivity, and in green is shown how that corresponds to benefits for the patients. So you can use lower doses, you can have more prominent disease reversal, and also you can have a better therapeutic window. That means you give the drug to a certain level to make the changes you need, but then you're not hitting or impacting other parts of the body that shouldn't be impacted. And then in the next two slides, I'll give a broad overview of the company and then go in a bit more detail. So here is what we're developing. Our first asset is an anti-cancer drug, then an anti-inflammatory drug, and here's our undisclosed third asset that we're building. All of this comes from our discovery platform at the university, and we have a license agreement to develop all of them. So you'll see here we're in 2026. What we're doing is we've formulated the drug with Lonza, a really well-known CDMO in Switzerland, probably one of the biggest and most successful companies in the biotech space in Switzerland. That enables us to get the drug into people's blood more effectively. So we're fundraising now to do the next steps that are quite expensive. So you need a few million to scale up kilograms of the drug to use in a clinical trial. And then to run the trial itself, starting in late 2027, we want to treat 30 patients that failed all other cancer therapies and give them one last chance to live longer and healthier lives. And then you can probably see what our business model is. We don't want to go to the very end, which would take another 5 years. We want to sell this, have an exit to a pharmaceutical company during that trial. So usually pharma wants to see a bit of human data before they buy the asset. And then in our pipeline expansion, we want to do the same thing with this other drug, so treating inflammatory diseases. And we're at an earlier stage there. We have a nice runway for another year to do more in-house experiments to find out which is the best type of disease. So is it going to be psoriasis or rheumatoid arthritis or colitis? So different kinds of inflammatory conditions. Lots of patients aren't responding adequately to the existing drugs. And for example, I've spoken to about 40 different pharmaceutical companies in the past 2 years to kind of position who's interested. We know there's 7 or 8 interested in this asset, 7 or 8 interested in this asset. So we're really confident if we have nice results at those stages, marketing exit, that we'll have a buyer there. And that generates a good return of investment for anyone investing at the moment. And then here, so far, we've raised 3 million in grants, and we closed a pre-seed last year of $500,000. That was just business angels, and the deep tech incubator from Geneva led that, Fongit. So now we're looking to do a second closing. I think it's mentioned here, so the open funding rounds, the second closing by the end of Q2. So now in the upcoming months, we want to raise another $500,000. We have a family office that's from the UK that's leading that. They're putting in 100K, and they want to also come in for our actual seed round. The first tranche or the first closing would be 3.7 million. And that's we're aiming to raise from VCs, family offices, and high net worth individuals. But we can also complement, as was mentioned in an earlier question, with some non-dilutive soft funding. So the government can also provide, if you bring in and you match or you provide a contribution there. And then to actually do the trial, so if we've got a lot of, we've done a lot of quotes, and it costs about 200,000 per patient if you want to do a trial in Western Europe. That's pretty normal, even more expensive in the States. So to do 30 patients requires just 6 million for that part, and then this is that second tranche of the 7 million. So together, to get to have some human data from now until the end of 2028, that would need 11 million in total. That's like a combined seed round. And with that, we can have potentially 2 exits for the 2 assets, and then start additional assets in our pipeline for different therapeutic areas. We've been talking to different pharma. We know what they're interested in. So some want to really get in the obesity space, other people in neurological diseases. And our platform, you'll see in the next slides, it's really adapted. You can target any disease space because you can engineer it to look at different pathways in the human body. And the business model I mentioned, we just want to go from hit stage early, we identify the molecules that look like they have some effect, and then sell them once they get into the clinic. We have some data, 10, 30 patients. That's enough to convince pharma there's a real effect. And then to spin each of those assets into a separate SPV so that you can have exits and keep the main company just flowing on with the pipeline expansion. And finally, just an overview of the value creation levers. We have a license agreement with the university for all of the assets, plus a patent. We had some nice news. It was published in Europe a few months ago, and that's a good precedent. So we're in examination for the full global market now. The US patent office is looking at it, and China, Japan. So that covers about 90% of sales in this immunotherapy space. And multi-billion markets, I'm not just quoting a total addressable market, but if you really look at the obtainable market, the SOM, even that is multi-billion because these are very large markets, cancer and inflammation. So the untreated patients and then our penetration rate in that market is going to generate multi-billion if successful. High pharma interest, I mentioned, I've already spoken to a lot of different big pharma, including the Swiss ones. They want to monitor and follow our progress until we get that human data. So joining me on the team, I'm co-CEO with Isham. My background's I did a PhD in immunology, so vaccines and adjuvant development, and got into the entrepreneur track about 5 years ago. We founded the company 3 years ago. Isham has a complementary expertise. Actually, he and the third co-founder, Professor Scapozza, they're both pharmacists, and they've done work in clinical trials. You see here, I'll just point out a few really stellar people that helped design our clinical trial that we're planning. Peter Lichtlin and Gabriella Galli, they've had very successful exits in the past years, even over $1 billion for the different clinical trials they've worked on. And our research team is shown there. They do all the science, and of course, lots of advisors. So we talk to many different people here to help with the individual aspects, including individuals that have been in different pharma units, so market access, commercialization. There we have input from all of them to also size our markets, etc. And then those were the main, and then going in a bit more detail, so what is the actual drug discovery platform? We've got a small molecule library, that's a few thousand molecules that represents millions of different shapes of molecules. And then we have the assay, that's the key intellectual property, it's in-house, we don't ever want to publish that. It took years to develop, so it's high, a threshold for to kind of protect, it's a barrier to entry by not revealing what that is. But we actually patent the molecules themselves, the composition of matter. So that's, there's multi-layered IP there. And we're looking now to expand to work with mid-size or large biotech and pharma to have a bigger pipeline to co-create IP. And in our whole strategy for how we go from drugs, you know, what we're targeting, which part of the cell we want to target with our drug, we have now an AI-based approach. And then molecular modeling, we also do docking, it's very computational. We've embedded AI into the whole spectrum of the drug discovery approach, including now to look for, to pretty much maximize the effects of the drug. So you see here, a blend of this, it improves the molecule properties, they're safer but more powerful. And we're choosing the best markets that are relevant that pharma wants to invest in, plus the best benefits for patients. We want to use AI to eliminate any molecules that could have toxicity issues early on. So that's pretty much the platform. And then looking at two more slides, so just to explain the first asset, how we compare to the others that are in the clinic. We're shown in the last column there. J&J is starting to make a drug that's also similar to ours, an A2AR antagonist. They had their first results in May, but we don't know much about that program. The other compounds, they just don't have the same safety profile or efficacy as ours. We've compared them head to head. We have years of data to show the advantages of that allosteric approach, targeting those special pockets that only we can identify. So you see here, based on the different data we have better therapeutic window, and we can restore the proper immune milieu so that the patients will be able to kill their own cancer cells. We have an expected improved clinical efficacy. So that's for the first asset, the advantages of our approach. And then secondly, here, this is for the anti-inflammatory drug. So it's a bit hard to read. This says historical small molecules. So maybe if you know someone that has arthritis, they take methotrexate or other types of drugs. They have some advantages. It's a small molecule, but there's a few shortcomings. Then there's biologics, antibodies. They're very expensive. It costs 20 to 80,000 to have these kinds of treatments. But they can be effective in some circumstances. The newer generation is the JAK inhibitors, and we have a PAM, a positive allosteric modulator. So it has some unique properties that will improve the safety and the efficacy, the power to undo the disease biology. So I think that was the last slide here. Yeah, so that was the last slide. So just to recap, thanks for your attention. So I will be happy to take questions. The key parts are it's a platform plus assets, and then we're raising 11 million in total. That will allow us to do a clinical trial that tests 30 patients that have failed every other cancer therapy available for different types of solid tumors. I can talk more about that. We spent a long time trying to figure out where the best market and biological relevance is for this drug. And then we're locally based, validated technology and strong IP position. So we'd be really happy to make connections here. If you know anyone that's looking for this type of investment, please feel free to connect us.